Okay, my friends, we are going to see all the important aspects in the sculpting mode in Blender. The first is that we need a geometry selected, so I will select the default cube, and to change to sculpting mode, I will go here to the modes and select the sculpting mode. Or I can just use the Ctrl Tab shortcut to get this pie menu where I can select the different modes. I can select sculpting mode, object mode, edit mode, whatever I need. Well, by default, I have this brush selected, the brush draw. If I press over the geometry, we can see that we are getting some volume, but this is very hard to see. And that is because, in this case, this cube only have a few polygons. If we change to edit mode, we can see that we only have the 6 faces of the cube. I will go back to sculpting mode, and what I need now is to create much more geometry to be able to see the sculptings. I will go here to the modifiers and I will add a subdivision surface modifier, and I will put here 6 subdivision levels. Now I will apply with Ctrl A, and now we have this nice geometry. Now if we make a stroke, we are going to see that we are adding now some real volume with the brush. Well, before continue with the tools, we are going to touch a little the user configuration to make more practical the sculpting interface. I will go here to Edit, Preferences, and here in Input, I will select this option, Emulate Tribute on Mouse. When I activate it, this is going to make the navigation with the tablet more efficient. The ideal is to work always with a pen tablet. In a moment, I will tell you more in depth about this. So the first, activate this option, Emulate Tribute on Mouse. And there is another option I would like to activate here in navigation, that is this one, Trackball. By default, it is in Turntable for the orbit method, and this is going to make all the orbits like aligned in the z-axis. So we are not going to be able to rotate perpendicular to the view. If I activate Trackball, we are going to be able to rotate in any direction we want. So if I want to make a stroke in a specific direction, I can rotate the view and align it to the direction I want. The next thing I do to make more efficient the sculpting mode is to create some shortcuts. The first shortcut I like to add is here in the modes. Here I have created some shortcuts for the different modes. For the sculpting, I added the shortcut with F3, and if you want to add a shortcut like this, you can right-click and add shortcut. This is something completely personal. You can try some custom shortcuts and test if they are efficient for your workflows. And so I repeat, F2 for object mode, F3 for sculpting mode, and F4 for texture paint. This is something you can customize. You can use custom shortcuts or just use the pie menu with Ctrl Tab. This is completely personal. Well, some other thing I like to do is to add the option to see a wireframe in the quick favorites. So when I press the Q shortcut, I will get this wireframe button, and with this I can see the geometry of the model. This option could be added from here, from this object panel, down here in Viewport Display. And here is the option, wireframe, right click and add to quick favorites. And now with the Q, I can select the option. Well, the following is to configure the lens. This is also completely personal. I can go here to View with this End panel, View, and in focal length, that is the angle of the camera, I like to have a value around 50. By default, it is in 35. It looks like this, but I think this is deforming too much the perspective. So I like to use this in 50. But as I said, this is completely personal as well. Well, one more thing I like to configure is here in the viewport shading, we have some matcaps. The matcaps are like the shading option of the geometry. Here you can select from different options. In general, I like to use the first one or the second one, depending of the geometry and my mood, but sometimes it's very useful to use matcaps like this one. For example, if I want to find any imperfection in the surface, this very glossy matcap is very useful because we can perceive any tiny details on the surface. But in general, I use the first two. This is as your taste. And finally, one more thing I like to change here is in viewport overlays, I like to uncheck the ground, I like to uncheck the axis, and I like to uncheck the grid. And now we have a much more clean version of the viewport with less noise. Well, I'm going to put down this interface to remove that panel. And we are going to see the basic options for the brushes. Here by default is selected the draw brush. So if I press over here, we are going to create this volume. Here we have the radius to increase the size of the brush. The bigger the number, the larger the brush. But we can also manipulate the size with the F shortcut. With F, we can make this bigger or smaller. The following is the strength of the brush. The bigger the number, the harder is going to be the stroke. We can see a difference here. We can use the shortcut Shift F to manipulate the strength. Now, here in the right side of the size and the strength, we have this little icon. This icon is the pen pressure. That means that if this is active, when we press very soft with the pen, the stroke is going to be soft, but if we press harder, the stroke is going to be more intense. So this is the reason why we should use a pen tablet for the sculpting, because using the pen tablet, we can control very easily the strength of the stroke. This is the same for the radius. If we press softly, we're going to have a thinner line, and if we press stronger, it is going to be thicker. So my recommendation to you is to get a pen tablet if you already don't have one, because for the sculpting this is completely necessary. You can do it with a mouse, of course, but the level of control is very far from what you can do with a pen tablet. So if you really want to make sculpting seriously, this is mandatory. Well, as I said, when we press, we can create this stroke, but we have some modifiers for the brush. If we press Ctrl, we are going to make the opposite operation. So if we were adding volume, in this case, we are going to remove it. This could be controlled also from here, in these plus and minus icons. If we have the plus, we are going to add. If we have the minus, it is going to remove. And with Ctrl again, we are going to do the opposite operation. So with Ctrl, we invert the brush, and with Shift, we are going to soften the surface. If we press Shift, it is going to make all the geometry less contrasted. It is going to soften all the surface. And if we pass the brush several times, it is going to create a very polished surface like this. Well, now we're going to see all the brushes we have available here. I'm going to move this to put everything in the screen. And here we have some color conventions. So we have the blue color, the blue brushes, and these brushes are going to add or remove simple volume, like this one. We are putting and removing volume. We have these red brushes that are going to deform the surface and modify mostly the contrast of the geometry, like the smooth brush and more brushes we are going to see in a moment. And the yellow color that is to displace the geometry. So we have the grab, for example, that is to displace the geometry. Well, now we're going to see the more important brushes we have here in the sculpting mode. I'm going to add one more level of subdivision, and we're going to start with this one. We have the draw brush, that as we saw is to add or remove geometry. We have the second that is the draw sharp, that is like the same, but it is more sharp, like creating creases. The third is the clay, and the clay is to add volumes. We can see we are like putting some volume shapes, and it's also very useful to fill spaces. We can see that we can fill these holes with this brush. The following is the clay strips. This is very similar to the last brush, but it is more drastic. This is like to put more aggressive volumes. This is very useful, for example, to create muscles and to add volumes in general. The next one is the clay thumb. This is to move the geometry, but I am not very familiarized with that brush. The next one is the layer brush, and layer is to add a layer of volume over the surface. To add or sink layers of volume. Then we have the inflate brush. As the name says, it is to inflate all the geometry. The following is very similar, but it is going to create like some bubbles, like this. Then we have the crease. This is to create a very visible creases in the surface, like cuts. Then we have the smooth, the same we can use with the shift and click this way. Then we have the flatten, that is going to put all the geometry in the same level. If we press, we can see that it is trying to put all in the same level. I don't really like to use this brush because I think it's very hard to control. The next one is the fill. The fill is to fill the spaces, fill the gaps, and put everything in the same level. Then we have the scrape, that is one of my favorite brushes, and this is to flatten some areas like removing volume, like cutting with a knife, like beveling. This is a very useful brush for hard surface, for example, or to create hard edges. Well, the following is the multiplane scrape. This is a brush that I don't used to use, but it is very helpful to create these sharp edges. Personally, I like to use other methods, for example, with the scrape and the pinch. Then we have the pinch brush, and this brush is to move all the geometry to the same point. As you can see, we are making this sharper. I will put this in wireframe, and this is going to move all the geometry to where I pass the brush. So this is very useful to sharpen edges. This is very useful also for moments when I have this kind of creases and I want to make them more sharp, like this. This is very useful to polish the details. I used to like this brush a lot to improve the final quality of the models. Well, the next one is the grab brush. This is to move big areas of geometry. This is one of the more important brushes. The next one is the elastic deform. It's similar to the grab, but it has more influence over the geometry around. The following is the snake hook, that is similar to grab, but it is going to take a big piece and move it along the stroke of the brush, so we can create these kind of shapes. But it is also going to deform a lot the geometry, so we need to be careful when we use it. I don't really like this brush. This is to move the geometry similar to what you can do with your thumb, but I don't find it very useful. The following is the pose brush, and this is to move pieces of geometry, taking as the axis the white point of this line. As the name says, this is mostly useful for posing long shapes. Then we have the nuts. This is to displace the geometry along the surface. This could be helpful for small corrections. And finally, we have the rotate brush. And this is to make this kind of swirl movements. And well, Those are in general the more important brushes. Not all the brushes are very useful. In my case, I mainly use the clay strips, the crease, the scrape, the smooth, pinch and grab, and no more. I think these few brushes are enough to create all the things we need, I think. Well, the following we can see are the masks. The mask brush is here, and with this we can draw over the surface, and we are going to have this dark area. What we are going here with this is blocking all this darkened area. So if I take the grab brush, for example, and I move, we are moving everything here, but not the masked area. We can also invert this brush. If I press the A shortcut, we can invert the mask, and we can manipulate only this white area, and the rest is going to be blocked. When we press the A shortcut, we have this pie menu, and here we have several options to manipulate the mask. For example, to make it sharper or smoother, and we can repeat the same operation several times by doing the following. You can move up the cursor and press the A several times. I can do the same to soften the mask, so I press A and move down. And with this we are making a mask with a smoother transition. In this pie menu we can also have options to make the mask smaller with shrink. We can make it bigger with grow. We can make it sharper, inverted, and all these options. And to mask, we have also this tool, box masking. I'm going to press Alt-M to clean all the mask. Let's select this tool, box mask. And what we're doing with this is to mask all the things we have inside the square I draw. And we have also this more useful mask, the lasso mask. And with this we can create these shapes to mask. Up here we have also the option front faces only. That allows me to mask only the front faces. In the back side, it is not going to mask anything. If this is deactivated, we are going to mask the front and the back side. And well, finally, down here, we have this tool that are the face sets. With this tool, when we make a stroke like this, it is going to change the color of the surface. That is because with this, we are creating a new group that can help us to isolate some areas. And for visualization, here in the viewport overlays, we can manipulate the visibility of the face sets. I like to have a value around 0.5, and I also like to put this in the quick favorites. So if we press right click over here, I'm going to add it to the quick favorites. And with Q, we can activate and deactivate the visibility. Well, as I said, making a stroke, we are going to create a new face set. And if we press Ctrl, we are going to expand it. If I press Ctrl, it is going to expand the selected face set. And with the Shift key, we are going to soften the edge of this face set. So the functionality of these face sets is basically help us to isolate some areas without modifying the rest. Like a kind of masking. If we press the H key, we are going to isolate this area. We can manipulate it without modifying the rest. With H, we are going to hide the rest, and with Shift H, we are going to hide what I have over the cursor. I'm going back here with Ctrl C, and we also have some options in this face sets menu that are face set from masked. If we have a mask here and we use that option, we're going to create a new face set from that mask. I'm going to select this again and soften it a little. We also have face set from visual. I have this option to hide some areas, so I will hide all this half of the sphere, and if we go to the menu and select face set from visual, we are going to convert all this visible geometry into a face set. I will press H again to hide, and this is in a face set. And finally, we have face set from edit mode selection. If we are in edit mode and we have this area selected, something like this, go back to sculpt mode and select face set from edit mode selection, and we are going to create this new face set from the selected polygons in edit mode. Also, from this menu we have some options to grow and decrease the face set. I need to put the cursor over the face set and press Ctrl W to grow the face set, and with Ctrl Alt W we are going to shrink it. So those are the shortcuts. Remember Ctrl W and Ctrl Shift W, and with H to hide or reappear the face sets. And with this basic information we can continue with the next video.